Back in 2013, we got BioShock Infinite, GTA 5, and even The Last of Us, all before it was remade 5 times and turned into a TV show. We also got the best pirate game ever made, Assassin's Creed Black Flag. Black Flag mixed up the Assassin's Creed formula that at the time was getting real stale and got rave reviews across the board. But among all the praise, Black Flag added something new and unwelcome to the Assassin's Creed formula: time saver packs. These were DLC packs that would reveal activities and collectibles on your map, or give you additional resources and upgrades for a few dollars each. At the time, there were rumblings in the community about these packs being greedy and unacceptable in a single player game. Some fans worried about the games being balanced around these packs and not around making the game as enjoyable as possible. But the general sentiment was that they didn't really impact the experience, and that was backed up by how great the game was. What nobody knew at the time was that these time saver packs would lay the foundation for the spread of full-blown in-game shops and microtransactions in all of Ubisoft's most popular franchises. Moving to 2014, Assassin's Creed Unity took microtransactions a step further for Ubisoft and added Helix credits, a premium in-game currency. Unity had similar time saver packs to Black Flag, but they also let you unlock gear and armor faster by hacking them with Helix credits instead of using the normal currency you earn in-game. This time, the community noticed the blatant addition of these microtransactions right into the game, and some even complained that without grinding side missions, your character wouldn't be strong enough to beat story missions, making them feel like they were being pushed to the shop. Others also took issue with the prices of the most powerful weapons being so high that they were seemingly unattainable without grinding for hours or by paying for them with Helix credits. Now, although these microtransactions were contentious, the larger discussion around Unity was how similar it was to every other Assassin's Creed game, and how incredibly broken and buggy it was on launch, taking away from the microtransaction discussion. But regardless of its other issues, Unity took Ubisoft's microtransactions another step closer to what we have today. 2015's Assassin's Creed Syndicate would follow a similar structure to Unity, but it wouldn't end there. The microtransactions bled into Ubisoft's other franchises, like Far Cry 5, that again also had in-game currency that you could use to buy weapons and vehicles with instead of the normal currency you would earn in-game. Far Cry 5 was the first of these games that really sparked a larger discussion about the microtransactions influencing the game's progression system. Many reviewers at the time noted issues with the in-game economy, where there was an abundance of weapons and vehicles to buy, but because they all cost thousands of dollars, you'd have a hard time accessing more than a handful in a normal playthrough without grinding because of how scarce money was, citing issues like enemies only dropping $5 or $10 each, and ammo costing way too much. The main issue being that you could easily solve these problems by buying in-game currency, making it seem like Ubisoft created a problem in their game so that they could sell you the solution. This started to raise big questions for fans. Was Far Cry 5's in-game economy actually balanced around microtransactions instead of making the best game possible? Are collectibles being made harder to find to push time saver packs? Was the pacing of Ubisoft's games designed around forcing you to either grind or pay for microtransactions? It's impossible to know for sure, but a trend was starting to appear. The next evolution in Ubisoft's microtransactions was with the release of their new RPG-style games, starting with Assassin's Creed Origins. Origins is where Ubisoft's modern in-game shop was born, and where microtransactions would be taken to a whole new level. The time saver packs were of course still there, but instead of being able to use Helix credits to buy items that are unlockable in-game, there was a separate shop full of items that could only be purchased with Helix credits. These wouldn't just be random cosmetic items either. These were full sets of gear with powerful stats and bonuses. It was possible to unlock some of these items for free in-game by buying chests that would give you a random chance at getting a Helix shop item, but if you were looking for something specific, good luck. The addition of the chests was likely more of a marketing move than anything else, with them being able to say that everything's unlockable in-game for free, but in reality, it would be an incredible grind to get any specific item due to the cost of the chests and the randomness of the items, that oftentimes wouldn't even be a shop item. The addition of the shop had players wondering if powerful items were being pulled from the base game to be sold separately in the Helix shop. However, regardless of player concerns, the shop in Origins would become the foundation of essentially every other single-player Ubisoft game. Far Cry 6 Immortals Fenyx Rising, and of course the next Assassin's Creed games would all follow the same formula of exclusive shop items that could technically be unlocked via grinding a randomized in-game shop, but in reality were locked behind giving Ubisoft more money. The other major complaint with Origins was that there was level gating that bloated the game and forced you to grind side content to unlock the story missions. And that brings us right into the follow-up to Origins, Odyssey. Odyssey was largely the same as Origins in terms of the in-game shop and time savers, except for the addition of the XP booster. Like Origins, Odyssey also level gated its content, but to a more extreme degree. It had a main story that was 15 hours longer than Origins, and a map with almost double the content. The problem being that many complained the additional content was repetitive and uninteresting. The level boosters conveniently sold in the cash shop, however, fixed this problem by allowing you to bypass much of the grind and focus much more on the main story content. This was by far the biggest controversy around Assassin's Creed monetization to date. Those who bought the level booster claimed it made the game smoother to play, while those who didn't complained about the massive grind they faced, especially in the later stages of the game. For many, this was evidence that Ubisoft was bloating their games and creating level gates to push you to the shop. So was the campaign actually being drawn out and level gated just to push the XP booster? Whether or not it was actually Ubisoft's intention, the community saw it that way. Fortunately, going into their next Assassin's Creed game, Ubisoft seemed to have got the message and they dropped the level XP booster from the shop entirely, and also did away with level gating content. The rest of the shop was still essentially the same as Origins and all the other Ubisoft games releasing at the time, but the removal of the level booster and level gating seemed like a step in the right direction. Things however got messy a little over a month after launch when Ubisoft patched in an XP booster to Valhalla's in-game shop. This was a slap in the face to the community and was seen as an extremely dishonest thing to do after not including it on launch and waiting just enough time to avoid negative reviews before adding it in. The general sentiment around Assassin's Creed Valhalla, however, was that you didn't really need the XP booster, as they handed out levels pretty generously for the majority of the game. The real issue with Valhalla, and the issue it brought to the forefront, was its length. Is a longer game always better? Some would say yes, but in reality, it depends on the execution and the reasons why it's longer. Assassin's Creed Valhalla is generally a good game for the first 10 to 20 hours. The combat's satisfying, the story's interesting, and who doesn't want to be a Viking? But once you hit the 25, 30, 35, 40, 50 hour mark, the game gets repetitive to the point where all you want is for it to end. Take a look at this chart. This is how long it takes to beat the main story of all the mainline Assassin's Creed games. Now it makes sense that the time to beat would go up with the swap to an RPG style of games with Origins. But since then, the games have just kept getting longer and longer, with the main story in Valhalla taking over twice as long to beat as Origins. This next graph shows how long it takes to fully complete the games. And as you can see, it also gets longer with each new release. The big question here though is why? Well, if you ask most people who've played Valhalla, it's not because the story requires it. It's because instead of level gating you, Assassin's Creed Valhalla forces you to complete all the arcs in the game, with an arc essentially being a chain of a few quests in a specific area of the map. Many of these arcs feel non-essential to the main story, and instead feel like they could have been used as side content. This makes it feel like instead of level gating you to force you to do side content, Ubisoft just baked the side content into the story of Valhalla. So then, if not for selling XP boosters, why is Valhalla so bloated and long? Well, one reason could be that the longer you play a game, the more likely you are to spend money on in-game shops. And so, now more than ever, games are trying to keep your attention for as long as possible. Odyssey and Valhalla aren't just one-offs either. This lines up with the trend in Ubisoft's other franchises too. Just look at the length of Far Cry games over time. Far Cry 6 is far and away longer than all the other games by a fair margin, and with seemingly no good reason for it. This also helps to explain the regular small content updates that these games provide alongside paid DLC. At this point, it almost feels like Ubisoft's trying to make their single-player experiences simulate a live service game that you need to continuously check for updates. Now, there is something to be said for the fact that in general, as technology's gotten better, and as games companies make more and more money, people expect bigger games. And that may be true to a certain degree, but there's a better way to go about it. Take the 3D Mario games for example. To beat any one of these games, it'll take you around 13 hours, regardless of if it's 1996's Mario 64 or 2017's Mario Odyssey. But to complete Odyssey, it'll take you over 60 hours, close to double the amount of time as any other 3D Mario game would take to fully complete. Odyssey was able to keep a tight, well-paced main story for those who want a faster, more streamlined experience, all while adding a ton of extra content for completionists without dragging out the game. Now, Ubisoft likely already knows all this, but they want you to keep playing their games for longer so that you'll check out the shop, so they'll likely just keep making their games longer on purpose. I believe this is the main reason why we basically only see Ubisoft releasing either fully live service games like Rainbow Six Siege or huge open world games like Immortals Phoenix Rising and Watch Dogs Legion, instead of new releases and franchises people are begging for, like a new Splinter Cell game. We haven't gotten a new Splinter Cell game since Blacklist back in 2013, and I'd be willing to bet that one of the reasons why is that Ubisoft hasn't figured out a way to extend the length of the game and shove in their precious in-game shop. That's also likely why, even if we do see these franchises get new releases, we see them warped from what they originally were into a longer open world game. Just like how Ghost Recon got needlessly turned into an open world game with Ghost Recon Wildlands. If Ubisoft were to release a game with a tight story experience that only ran 10 to 15 hours long, why would you feel the need to go buy cosmetics in their in-game shop? Instead, it seems like Ubisoft is focusing its efforts on releasing the longest games it can to encourage you to spend even more money on their in-game shop. So that brings us to the big question here. Are Ubisoft's games being designed around monetization? Would collectibles have been made just as hard to find without time saver packs? Would the economy in games like Far Cry 5 be as stingy without the ability to buy items with real world money? Would there be just as much grind in Odyssey if you weren't able to buy an XP booster? Would all Ubisoft's new games be just as long as they are if there wasn't an in-game shop? We'll never know for sure, but for me, there's just too many examples of issues people have had with these games that all seem to have been included to help sell microtransactions for it to all be a coincidence. Changing the design of a game to sell microtransactions isn't just a theory either. There are plenty of examples of developers who say they've had to change their games at the request of executives to add monetization. One high-profile example of this is Shadow of War, that was so blatantly designed and balanced around selling microtransactions that after backlash from the community, they had to take out the microtransactions and rebalance the game. All this makes it really hard to give Ubisoft the benefit of the doubt, not only because it's happened so much, but because they directly benefit from designing these pain points into their games so that they can turn around and sell you the solution or push you into the shop. And for me, if spending real money makes the game better, more fun, or less frustrating, why shouldn't the features have been included in the base game to begin with? Now, I know I've talked a lot of shit about Ubisoft in this video, but their games aren't all bad. Sure, they have their tried and true formula, but Black Flag and Far Cry 3, for instance, were some of my favorite games back in the day, and most of the games I mentioned in this video have some great aspects. All the Far Cry games are always fun to run around in and cause mayhem. Far Cry 5 especially also has a great story, and even though the new Assassin's Creed games certainly have their flaws, they've made some incredible open worlds and some solid stories. Unfortunately, I think all these games are being taken down a peg by being forced to accommodate all the monetization added to them. My hope is that someday Ubisoft will return to a time when the quality of their games came before profits, but I'm not convinced they ever will. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, please consider subscribing for future updates.